Today, we're jumping into one of the wildest stories from the world of online gaming. It's all about how a single, frustrating technical problem didn't just annoy people, it completely warped and reshaped the entire competitive culture of a massive game, The Elder Scrolls Online.
And this quote right here, it absolutely nails the heart of the story. If you're a veteran ESO player, you know exactly what this feels like. This sets the stage for a really bizarre time in the game's history.
All right, so to really understand what happened, we need to go back in time. Back to an era where the biggest, scariest enemy you'd face in player versus player combat wasn't another player. It was the server itself.
Okay, first, let's get on the same page with a word you're going to hear a lot, meta. It's basically the best way to play the game to win at any given moment. And as you're about to see, sometimes the meta gets shaped by some very weird forces.
For a long time, if you wanted to play the huge battles in ESO's main PvP zone, Cyrodiil, it felt less like an epic war and more like you were watching a PowerPoint presentation. Seriously, the lag was just a fact of life.
And I'm not talking about a little bit of stutter. Oh no, this was a whole different beast. Imagine hitting a button and your character just stands there for 3 seconds. You try to switch your skills? Nope, didn't register. Trying to break free from a stun? Good luck with that. The game was basically unplayable in the way it was designed to be played.
So what happens when a game is fundamentally broken? Well, people don't always just quit. They get creative. They adapt. And this right here is where the story gets really fascinating.
This was the big question on every single PvP player's mind. If you can't rely on your timing, if you can't rely on your reflexes, how in the world do you win a fight? The answer they came up with created a truly bizarre meta.
And this is what the community started calling it, the lag meta. It was a whole style of playing that wasn't about outsmarting other players, it was about outsmarting the game's own terrible performance.
So what's so wild about this philosophy is that it's a complete rejection of skill and complexity. Forget fancy combos. The winning strategy was to be as simple and as brutal as possible. You used instant attacks because you couldn't trust anything with a cast time to actually go off. It was all about cramming as much damage as you could into the one single moment the server decided to pay attention to you.
Now, this whole lag meta thing went on for years. It was just how you played the game. But then, the developers did something that flipped the entire table over. They upgraded the servers. And you can see the turning point right here. Before 2022, it was a mess. Then, bam, mid-2022, new hardware comes online. And afterwards, players started reporting that it made a massive difference. It was night and day.
And you know, the funny part is, the developers themselves were trying to keep expectations low. They basically said, hey, this new hardware might not fix everything. But for the players who are actually in the game, fighting on the front lines, the change was immediate, and it was huge. The game was actually working.
The impact was so dramatic that players who had avoided Cyrodiil like the plague for years came flooding back. All of a sudden, those huge, epic battles weren't just possible, they were actually the most popular way to play PvP again. And that leads us into the modern era of the game. An era where the old rulebook got thrown out the window, because with a stable game to play on, skill was finally king again.
That great equalizer, the lag, was gone. And with it gone, the game could finally reward people for actually being good, for planning their builds, for practicing their rotations, for actually playing with skill.
This is when you started to see the return of high-skill techniques like weaving. Weaving is a core part of ESO combat, where you sneak in extra attacks between your main abilities. It massively boosts your damage, but it needs split-second timing, something that was just a pipe dream back in the laggy days. So you can see this incredible shift in thinking. The whole meta changed from being about brute force and simplicity to being about complexity, precision, and skill.
I mean, just look at a combat rotation now. Weave an attack, apply a damage over time, weave again, hit him with a big ability, swap bars. This kind of sequence, which requires perfect timing, is now the standard for playing well. Back in the lag era, this would have been a complete fantasy.
And because the game was actually working properly, all the tiny little details about your character build suddenly mattered again. This led to a huge explosion in Theorycrafting, where players dive deep into the numbers to squeeze out every last drop of performance.
Just look at this table for healers. Players are now having serious debates about the subtle trade-offs between different stats. Do you want better, slow, consistent healing or bigger emergency heals?
This level of deep, strategic thinking was completely pointless when you were just hoping your spell would even cast in the first place.
So what's the lasting legacy of this whole performance revolution? What does it all mean for the game and its players today?
Well, it all comes down to a fundamental change in philosophy. Before, winning was about surviving the server. Now winning is about outplaying your opponent. The goal shifted from beating the game's flaws to mastering its systems. It's no longer about who can cheese the lag the best. It's about who the better player is.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Now that things are stable, is the current meta a true measure of skill? Or have players just found a new, more complicated way to find the most effective tactic available? The game has changed for sure, but the competitive drive to find the absolute best way to win, that never changes.